Hello, my name is Eric Brooks. I'm a brand specialist with Alpine Electronics, and I want to come at you with something a little bit different today. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, Colette, who works at Alpine, and she was telling me about how she just found this marketing material that we had produced years ago that documented all of the demo vehicles that Alpine had made. So what I thought I would do is, why don't I call up Steve Brown, who still works with Alpine, and he and his team were responsible for these demo vehicles. Why don't we have a conversation with him about it? Let's have him talk us through each of these vehicles, and we'll show you images of the vehicles that he's developed. So let's get him on the phone, shall we? Hello, everyone. I am here with Steve Brown. He's right there. And I contacted Steve about going through some of the demo vehicles that were done by he and his team through the years. And so he was excited, right? You were kind of excited about talking about it?
Yeah, it's nice to, it's cool going through the pictures. You found that PowerPoint and, it brought us some good memories. So I thought, yeah, let's discuss it. Let's go through it.
Yeah. So, for those that aren't aware, or maybe for the younger generation of people, they may not know that Alpine created these kind of over the top demo cars. And, it's really amazing what you guys did.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting time for Alpine. It was a time, I had just moved to Southern California to pursue that exact thing. And, we'd really made a department around creating these vehicles. And some of the stuff we were allowed to do was great. I remember a lot of retailers would come up to me at shows like CES and some of the, the Spring Break Nationals and those kinds of things. And go, man, I wish we could do stuff like that. And I go, don't try to do stuff that elaborate because you're probably going to go broke trying to do it. The only reason we're able to do it is because we had a dedicated team with dedicated time, and I think that's the key. The time is really the most critical part with any of these kinds of projects. Every one of these cars you're going to see, there's between 1,500 and 4,000 hours of just labor.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So they're big projects, but we were very committed to using those cars to really kind of elevate the brand and showing what was possible. And it was a really fun time.
Well, what was really cool about them? So first off, it grabbed people's attention, right? So the cars are very memorable. The things that you guys did to them were very memorable. But really, the reason they were created was to highlight the product, because the product is.
Yeah, we every year at the Consumer Electronics Show, which is the first week of January, typically in the new calendar year, we would launch our new product line and we would create a demo vehicle to highlight or showcase something about that product line. And each one was kind of had a different theme and had a different focus depending on what the product that we were really trying to launch that year was going to be.
Yeah. So it was funny when I saw these pictures and we started talking about this. I remember very vividly most of them, but actually there was one, and once I saw the picture, I was like, oh yeah, man, I remember that vehicle. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Because the one I'm thinking about, I didn't really recall it at first, was that excursion. So let's go ahead and pull this thing up.
I've got a good story about that excursion too.
Yeah, well, that's what we want to hear. So this was an excursion. And I saw that this was done in 2000. So this was for the CES 2000 show. And so let's look at the install here a little bit. So why don't you walk us through this thing?
Check out that flip out radio in the dash of that bad boy. And CD changer built into the dash of that bad boy.
Yeah. So that was a DVD changer, right? 6-disc?
Sorry, DVD changer, yeah. And that was kind of, again, we talked about product releases at the time. That was, a big product focus. And, the navigation too. If you look down a little bit, you can see the navigation units. Those DVD and CD based navigation systems they're really hot, and they were one of the only ones on the market at the time.
Yeah, I don't know if people will be able to see my mouse, but I'm going to run that over. So that was the DVD ROM, right?
Yep.
Right there, and that we had the baddest navigation there was.
It was a great system for the time. You look back on it now, and it's kind of funny, but compared to what we have now, and this was only 20 years ago. It really wasn't that long ago, but at the time it was a great system. This was kind of one of the first big fabrication projects that we really embarked upon. You know, we had done some other things before this, some other vehicles, some other trucks, but this was really one of the first major fiberglass fab projects that we did.
Yep, yep. I see this DVD player real quick. I see this DVD player here on the bottom,
Yeah.
right? I found one of those in my cabinet the other day, so I still have one of those. It's funny.
I bet it still
So,
works
all right.
too.
Yeah, it does. Dude, it's Alpine. It works forever. All right, let's move on because the back of this thing is really what I remembered. I was like, yeah, this thing's thick, right? So let's go to the back, and you can kind of see there's a whole bunch of products.
Yeah, so there were two things that were really kind of focal points. One was those R series subwoofers, as you can see, right?
Yeah, up here. Yeah.
And there's 12 of those suckers in there. And the good story, well, there's two good stories about this vehicle. One of the good stories is at CES, and I remember this ended up at a dealer way after CES, many years later. And the first thing I did is I climbed up on the roof and looked at the roof, because there's a dent in the roof that happened at CES, and that was because one of the light fixtures actually vibrated out of the ceiling because this thing was beaten so hard, and it fell down and crashed into the roof and left a dent.
Oh my god!
So that was a good one. The other good one, my partner in crime at the time, Chris Yotto, who built this vehicle with me, he was working on a project, one of those side panels. I think it was on the left side by the rear passenger door. And he actually ended up super gluing himself to the vehicle. Okay. And this happened, it was late. I had already left. It was very late.
Oh no.
And, you know, Chris, being the badass that he is, he actually refused to break the panel to remove his finger. He just stayed stuck there for the rest of the night.
Seriously.
And kept messing around with it until he was able to get it off. But
That's
you
funny.
know, it's just, it's stuff that happens when you're working late and burning, you know, the midnight oil and doing crazy hours. You know, those kinds of little things happen. Another really unique thing about this this vehicle, you know, was all the fiberglass, and you're starting to see some of the fabrication now. Now you see this a lot, but at the time in 2000, this wasn't really that prevalent. You weren't seeing this in a lot of vehicles, so it really wasn't that common. And you know, some of the techniques that we were starting to pioneer, you'll see in later vehicles as we move through.
Yeah. And just real quick, talking about the product here. So I see Type R, right? So it was Type R back in the day. So that's kind of where the whole Type R began. I see MRV, that looks like 1507s there. Yeah. A bunch of those.
1507s. I think we were running, I think we had 6 of them in there, if I remember correctly, one per pair.
Wow. And those amps were just awesome. So a lot of
it was systematic, some serious power.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that you see today in our products was built back then and built upon through the years, which is really just cool. So all right, so that's an awesome way to get it started. And so that would kind of start our journey down memory lane. And we started off with a really cool system. But let's take it to a spot where more people might recognize. Yeah. And what is this vehicle here? This is a.
Oh man. You know this thing.
Okay, real quick before you start. Okay, I've sat in a lot of great sounding cars, and I used to rep home audio products, high-end home audio products.
Yeah. So you had some stuff.
Listening to this thing, it was awesome. So go ahead and tell us what it is.
Yeah, first of all, this was my personal car. And we made this for the CES show in 2001. And this was the launch of the first generation of F#1 status products, which, you know, many of you Alpine fans probably remember. It's always been our premier sound products. Yep. We've done 2 generations. This was the first gen. We built 2 cars for this. This was really the one that was the most labor intensive. This is a 1995 BMW M3. You know, exterior wise, it's fairly simple. You know, wheels, a few painted body trim, nothing really, you know, over the top. Lowered a little bit. It had a supercharger on. It was a pretty cool car. But inside, every panel in that vehicle was refabricated from scratch. And any E36 owners that know what an E36 BMW looks like, you'll notice nothing in there, from the center console, the seats, the door panels, the dashboard, all fabricated from scratch. And there's a lot of things in here that you don't see too. You know, there are steel enclosures in the kick panels, you know, to direct the sound and to really keep it keep it isolated. A lot of those kind of things went into the design. We really used a lot of steel fabrication underneath the fiberglass for strength, for the amp rack, for the processor rack in the back, and to really make all those things integrate. And it's funny, I ended up selling this vehicle a few years after we built it. Didn't hear what had happened to it for the longest time. And about 5 years later, I was able to actually catch up with the current owner, and I got a chance to take a look at it. And I was really pleasantly surprised by how well everything had held up, because the guy had been driving it, and the car looked great still. The fabrication work really stood the test of time. So that really made me happy. But this thing was really designed to be stealth, in its own way. I mean, you notice you don't see any speakers when you're looking in the vehicle, right? In the front. Right. It's designed to be, to be subtle. We wanted to change the interior, but we wanted to make it look like what BMW might have done. And we wanted to make it more symmetrical so that it was better from both seats.
Right.
So there was a lot of time and engineering that went into this thing.
And you basically had 2 subwoofer systems in this car, right?
That's right. So what we did, we had a 10-inch sealed sub underneath basically where the glove box would have been. We removed the glove box and made it into a sub enclosure when we redid the dash. And we also had 2 12s ported in the trunk. But what we found is, with the tuning and the processing, we were able to kind of make it work in such a way that in SQ mode, the rear subs were only playing the very, very lowest frequencies, 35 or 40 hertz and down, and everything else was handled by that 10 up front. And you'll notice in subsequent years of vehicles, we really learned from this one that, wow, if you can fit a sub up front in your car, the effect is just amazing. It really changes the perception and the way bass is heard inside of a vehicle. If it's not always possible to do in every vehicle, but when you can do it, the sound benefit is great. You can see here too that big processor in the middle of the trunk, which actually floats on a rack all the way through the center console. It goes to the front. I don't know if you have a picture of it, but what we did, we took an RC car body, an E36 RC car body, and underneath that body, which was magnetically held in place, were all of the components and fusing for all of the components in the vehicle. So it was all laid out in a logical way that you could see through that clear cover, and that extended back to this processor. That processor was the first F1 status processor, which at the time F1 status was just really a head unit and a processor combo. Yeah. So this was the debut of that system in this vehicle.
Yeah. So this was before the F1 speakers came out.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
This was only just a head unit and processor were the only 2 components that were in that first system.
Now we have some pictures of a vehicle you guys did that had the amps and all that stuff. Yeah. So we'll get to that.
That's the second gen. We'll get to that one here. Yeah. That was a 05, I believe.
Yeah. So let's move on. This was a beautiful car. I remember
this it. 2001 CES. So this is a first launch of F1, and very well received.
Yep. All right. Next up, the
RSX.
Yep, I remember this car too. This was 2002.
Now, for old guys like us, Eric, you'll remember that what was going on in the early 2000s was hot import nights, right? Mm-hmm. That was really starting to not just hot import nights, but the import scene in general was really becoming a big popular thing. You're seeing a lot of parts for these cars, you're seeing the beginnings of stuff like turbo swaps, and guys were drag racing front wheel drive cars. So it was just becoming a really popular thing. Fast and Furious was around that time as well. So that was really what influenced the design of this. This was designed to be a show car primarily, not really a sound cue car. And I would say on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as labor, this was about a 6. We didn't have as much time into this one. But you'll see a few of the elements that we did incorporate. First of all, go back 1 page, Eric. I want to show you something. The airbrushing on this car.
Oh yeah.
So this airbrushing was done by a guy that we met in Southern California. He's a local artist. His name's Noah, and he does all kinds of stuff. And we collaborated with him on this and a bunch of cars after this for different themes. And that was one of the kind of signature looks on some of our vehicles, because it kind of tied in with the sound, and at the time it really gave it a good visual flair. So that's one key element on this. If you go into the next page, Eric, you'll see that The dash, we kind of spent some time, we spent time on the parts that people were going to see the most. The dash, we refabbed the dash from scratch. We refabbed the back, the back hatch area, and we did some work on the door panels, but this wasn't a complete end-to-end build compared to some of the other ones. But this one had a lot of the elements like the floating amp racks that you've seen in some of the other stuff. And a lot of the lighting as well. The lighting was becoming a very popular element in vehicles at that time. You remember, and trying to make it so it wasn't visible where the light came from. So making edges out of plexiglass and treatment around plexiglass, edges to make that glow happen without having a source of the light be really obvious. So that was becoming a pretty popular trend at the time.
Yeah, and I remember this thing got used in a TV show or something too, right?
Yeah, it did. And God, you're gonna probably ask me which one, and my memory is gonna fade. But
it was one of those investigative shows. It was like a CSI or something.
That's right. The reason I'm thinking about this is one of the ones that we're going to talk about later was in an episode of Entourage. So that's what was kind of clouding my brain. But yeah, we were starting to get some good press on these vehicles, because by this time, after the M3 and this vehicle, people really started to kind of look to us to, what are they going to build next year? We started to have a line outside of the show at CES when it would first open for especially retailers, mobile guys would want to come in and check out what we built. And it was super cool. It was a great feeling, and it was great to, collaborate with those guys and talk to them. And, we've always been very open about these builds. We've always posted installation pictures, and, I spent a lot of time talking to guys about, how stuff was made, how it was fabbed, the processes that we went through, because we know that retailers that can do this level of fab, maybe not to this extreme, just because it's not, usually that effective in a retail shop, but to have that capability to do that fab really sets a shop apart. And you know what? 20 years later, same exact thing, right? Your shops that have this capability are generally more successful.
Yep. No, this was, I remember this was one of the cars I was like, wow, man, I love it. Well, plus I had an Integra a couple of years before this one.
Yeah.
So I see this thing and I'm like,
this thing's awesome. The RSX was a hot car when it first came out, because, the Integras and Civics were kind of the common thing. And then the RSX was one of the cars kind of built during that tuner era. And that's when, the companies were starting to catch on. And there was some pretty neat stuff built into that car to make it unique for the time.
So after this car came a car that really kind of pushed the envelope of what people were going to do. As soon as I put this one up, I know people are going to remember it. So let's talk about this one.
Yeah, this was definitely the turning point in our demo car building careers. When this car came out, it changed everything. You can see, we partnered with Wings West. You can actually see the logo on the side of it, which most of you guys probably don't remember what that is. But at the time,
what's Wings West?
Popular parts retailer. Yeah, exactly. You can see the airbrushing, but really what set this vehicle apart was what was inside. And it's because of what we did with the interior. We actually made this thing center drive. And this was the first application of a center drive vehicle that, that we'd seen in the car audio, realm. And, I remember where I was when I got the idea for this and for the rack that actually goes around. You'll notice there's no gauges on this thing. The gauges actually are on arms that motorize up and wrap around you once you sit inside of it. And now, I was on an airplane on the way back from a show, and just thinking about things that would be cool and things that I had seen, and this is what we ended up coming up with. And this car definitely changed the game for Alpine. The amount of eyeballs on it, the fact that it had, we were integrating a lot of the elements, the subwoofers up front, the screens up front, doing things in the door panels, the custom fab, really extreme fabrication,
nitrous in the doors.
Yeah. It's crazy stuff,
Yeah.
Because at the time, that's what was happening. That's where the car scene, the young car culture was with the vehicles like that were really, pushing the envelope and over the top. And you're starting to see more of, custom paint, custom fiberglass work and those kinds of things. So, we really wanted to push it to set ourselves apart.
So I thought about something the other day, and I showed my kids, right? My kids are 14 and 17, and my son drives an old Honda, and he loves the whole Fast and Furious thing. He's like old soul, I guess. Anyway, so I'm like, you know what? Alpine did a video that was it was weird, right? It was weird. The marketing team put it, and this car was in it.
Mute video.
The mute, right? So that thing's on YouTube, okay? So if anyone wants to go see a really strange but cool movie that this car is in, it's called the Mute movie, and there's kind of a premise behind the movie of what great music can do, and these people, they're born without ears. It's a culture with no ears, and then Alpine shows up with this unbelievable sound system, and this guy goes through a transformation where now he can hear, and it's just opened up his world, right? That's kind of what the movie's about, right?
It sure is. I'm glad you reminded me about that. I haven't watched that video in a long time, but I'm gonna have to go look it up after we're done here, because it's it really fits the car. It's just a little bit beyond, and it works with it for sure.
Yeah, and it's not a long movie. It's like 5-7 minutes long, something like that. It's not long.
Short.
But it's really cool. But my kids looked at me and they're like, "You're weird." They're like, "Dad, that's the strangest thing I've ever seen." Hey, but the car's cool, right? And that's what Alpine does.
Yep.
World of sound.
That's
so.
Right. This thing was 100% designed to get eyeballs on it. That was its main purpose.
Yep. So, all right. So let's keep going, because there's more eyeball catching material here to show. So,
yes, sir. That's right.
This was another one that's just over the top.
Yeah. So the Mini had just been released not too long before this, and again, it was a pretty hot car. It was very unique. It was retro. A lot of the car manufacturers in that time were doing retro things. Modern drivetrain with an older looking vehicle wrapped around. You remember the new Beetle was around that time, Jaguar. Some of those car companies like that were doing those with that kind of stuff. And we got this car. It was originally a convertible, and we started messing with it, and we just ended up hacking this thing all to pieces. I mean, we ended up cutting most of the top, well, really the whole top completely off, and doing it completely from scratch. And the idea was to make a true speedster. What would a speedster look like if you could have one seat, and you could build some cool elements into this thing. You're seeing some of the stuff that we developed over the years all coming together in this vehicle. Like, for example, these arms, which kind of intertwine to show screens on both sides of the vehicle. At the time, you have to understand, screens in your car were cool. If you had screens in your car, you were cool, period. That's just how it was in the early mid-2000s.
There were no iPads. There were no iPads to hang from your back seat. There were no iPhones. I had
a flip phone. Everybody had flip phones. That was what was cool. So, this kind of stuff, it may look a little bit dated now, but you have to put it in context of when we introduced it and what was going on at the time.
This was cutting edge.
What's that?
It was cutting edge.
Yeah, and another really unique thing about this car was the way you got in it. You might notice there's no doors on it. So we made a sled.
Find a picture. Let me see if I can find a picture.
Yeah, maybe that shows it a little bit. So this whole sled, this whole thing, which has two 12-inch subwoofers. Oh, there's a good story behind that one too. And they're ported. The port actually fires right into your back, and this seat is plexiglass. It's ribbed plexiglass. And I got this idea from my dad. My dad built a Volkswagen dune buggy back in the day when I was a kid. And to make the seat, he just took 1/2-inch tubing and he bent it in a shape, to make the seat frame. I thought, well, that's a cool idea. What if you did that with plexi so that it would be, you could light it and do some cool stuff with it.
Right.
And that spaces your back out from the port so that the port can pressurize right through the seat. So, and it was actually very effective. But to get this sled to work, this thing slides out to where this seat comes all, back behind the taillight. So it comes out about 6 feet. And the engineering to make that work was pretty significant. That sled is very, very heavy because it's steel and fiberglass on top. And we used industrial sliders, like bearing pillow blocks to be able to make this thing slide forward and back. It uses a lead screw with the big old motor on it to be able to move it back and forth. And it was just very radical, out of the kind of out of the box thinking, and thinking of ways that we could take the center drive concept further than the Civic, because this was a year after. We loved it and we wanted to do more things with it, but how could we make it new and unique? and keep it innovative and fresh.
Well, I'm going to go back because I want to talk a little bit about the product that's in here. So,
oh yeah, there's a
so
good
that
one
was,
right
that was,
there on that page.
yeah, so that was our processor. That was our processor,
Yep.
right? The PXA H700, right? So you
and
can do
that's the controller of the
5.1.
701.
Yep, 701. And these speakers, these were just incredible speakers, right?
They really were.
Yeah, Type X.
That's right. The only downside of these speakers, and depending on when you see a picture of this car, you might notice it, is they would change color over time. The cone color would be blue at first, and then it would kind of change to I don't know how to describe it, almost a grayish blue as time went on. They still worked and sounded great, but the color of the cone would actually change. It was weird.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was great technology in them. I mean, they sounded awesome. Neodymium magnets. It was they were cool. So, and a lot of
the hammer surround on the side of that thing, that was a precursor to a lot of the things that we do today. It works. It's Alpine patent, and we patent it because it works.
That's right. And what's cool about it are the things that we learned, again, like I talked about in the excursion, things that we learned in these speakers, we improved on through the years. And we still have these families of speakers that were created way back then, with X series now and R series now, that were developed years and years ago, and we just keep improving on.
You can see the lineage, definitely.
Yeah. So this is a really cool car. It actually lives in Florida now, which is pretty cool. So I get to say hi.
Yeah, it's neat. It's nice to see, a lot of these cars. This one actually sat in our lobby for the longest time, and the main reason, because it's so small, I was able to get through the door. So that kept it in good shape for a long time. It wasn't used for a lot of other things. So, yeah, it's neat to see it, pretty much as it was for the most part, and it sure brings back some memories.
Oh yeah, no, it's a beautiful ride. It still looks great, man. I see it every once in a while. It looks awesome. All right, so let's take it up a notch. Oh, there you go. That's the full slider
out. The picture that we were looking for. That's what the sled all the way out. Oh yeah. While we're on this topic, Eric, I wanted to bring up one other thing. The subwoofer. Really hard to see in that picture, but if you look really closely at this car, you'll notice there's a subwoofer kind of inside of what looks like another subwoofer frame. And that's exactly what it was. So these were the X series woofer, which at the time was brand new. And we weren't sure if they were going to make the CES show. So we designed the car to take Type R15s. And so that if these woofers didn't show up, we'd have a plan B. Well, they did show up. So then we had to decide, well, how are we going to adapt the woofer into a 15-inch hole, because the car was already painted. So what we did is we took 15-inch R sub frames, and we actually cut them and tapered them and chrome plated them. And that became the adapter to allow the 12-inch to work.
So I remember seeing that back in the day and thinking, oh man, that's really cool but I never knew.
Look at it, it's like, that's kind of neat, but why would you do it that way? I got a lot of questions about that.
So this is why it's important to do things like this, because these are stories and things that we would have never known.
You never know. And it's for it points to one of the big challenges with building anything, and especially something where you're showing off new product, there's a tight time frame. And usually at CES, as we've got limited amount of samples of new things, and sometimes they make it, sometimes they get held up on customs. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So you have to kind of think about that and come up with a plan B just in case.
So let me ask you, when you have these, I know that I was a rep for years while you guys, while these things were debuted at CES, and I remember seeing the lines and the people just cramming in to see these cars. You ever have any celebrities sit in these vehicles?
Yeah, I did, and probably my favorite one was Ice-T and Coco at CES. That was with one of the vehicles that we're going to talk about in a minute.
Okay. But,
we had a lot of celebrities that would come and check these things out, because at the time CES was a pretty big deal. It's become a lot different over the years as far as its focus, but then it was really about audio. It was about sound. It was about those types of things, and of course whatever new TV was out at the time. But there was a lot more enthusiasm centered around sound at CES than there is now. So it was certainly a more electrifying environment, I guess is how I would describe it.
Right. All right. Well, I look forward to hearing that story when we get to that vehicle.
It's
So
a pretty good one.
yeah. So I was kind of leading the witness. I just couldn't remember which car it was. So let's go on.
Yeah. Well, it could have been either one because of the way that it works, but it was that one, and I'm sure we've got pictures of it somewhere.
Yeah. Well, we don't have them for this presentation, but we'll keep talking about it. So this car, this is second gen, right?
Second gen F1 status, CES 2005. This was a BMW X5. This was actually driven by our president of Alpine for a long time. It was his daily driver. And once he was done with it, they were talking about selling it, and we thought, man, that'd be a perfect vehicle to do kind of what we're thinking. And this is what we were thinking. We wanted to have we wanted to do a center drive vehicle, but we wanted the experience to be good for two people. And the way we did that is by making the seats one in front of the other. And each door, you can see the doors motorized out. They come out about, I think about 30 inches, 35 inches on each side. Both of the factory doors, which were steel, were welded together and been fabricated into this mount. So each side, this door, which was about 6 feet wide, would slide out of the car, and you would get in. The driver would get in the left side of the car, or as we're looking at it, the right, and then the passenger would get in the other side. And then the doors would motorize together along with the seats, and then once it was together, both seats were now directly in the middle of the car. And right. This generation of F1 status was not just a processor and head unit; it was also speakers and a full line of amplifiers, etc. Yep. So we had a three-way setup in the front, built into the dash of this car. So the sound quality was just ridiculously good. And we had 10-inch woofers built into the dashboard. I mean, this thing sounded just unlike anything I've ever heard, still to this day.
Yeah, it was amazing.
We talked about the Noah, the guy that worked on a lot of these vehicles, and this was probably my favorite vehicle that Noah ever did for us, because we wanted a music theme. So we thought, well, what if we painted pictures of artists from the 20th century up till now on the side of the vehicle? And so that's what we did. And if you can see, there's 6 on each side, and there's 2 on the hood, which you can't really see in this picture, but what Noah actually did is he would take a projector and he would project the image onto the side of the car, and then he would sketch it. If you ever get a chance to see this thing in person, you can actually still see the pencil marks on top of the airbrushing, the very light pencil marks that he used to kind of trace just a basic shape, and then he would go back and airbrush in all the details, and then we clear coat over the top of it. So this thing is a piece of art to me. You look at the side of it, it's a piece of art. It really is one of a kind. And probably my favorite thing with this vehicle was, especially with younger people, having them go around the car and tell me who are each one of these artists. Obviously, you can see Tupac there, Frank Sinatra, Jimi Hendrix. That's Mick Jagger, Kurt Cobain, Bob Marley. On the other side, we've got a very young picture of John Lennon, and without fail, kids would think it was Harry Potter.
Really?
Every single one of them.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can see in this picture what you were talking about with the doors being welded together. So it was these 2 massive doors. I don't know that I have a picture of the back, but it was all acrylic, all plexi, the whole back of this, that BMW logo that came up and kind of held it in place.
Welded, yeah, we actually, that was a pretty cool part of this vehicle too. For some of the other projects like the Mini, I didn't mention when we were talking about it, but the curved windshield was plexiglass. And we had a place in Southern California that fabricated that stuff for us. But we had to make the mold to make it work. And in this case, this was the trickiest one that we ever did, because the mold, what we took the 2 hatch panels, which open like this on those BMWs, and we welded it together, welded the whole thing together, and we put it on a platform, and we made it into a mold for the plexi. And the tricky part is trying to get it to lay into the negative portions of the mold. Right. And we had to go back and cut, color sand, sand and buff really some of those sections out to get it perfect. It was a lot. It was a ton of work.
It had to be, if you're laying acrylic in that, it's got to be perfect. There can't be any
imperfection. It's got to be perfect, because you're going to see everything, every imperfection that you're going to notice. Yeah. And, we wanted it. This was a sound quality vehicle, so we know. You go to a show and you're listening to a car. Well, usually when it's being listened to, it's closed up. Well, we can't have that. This is a demo car, right? So we wanted it to be visible to other people while we're doing sound demos inside, and that's why we did the plexi that you could see
smart.
through the car.
It was really smart. It was innovative. So this is some of the products. This is all, again, this is all F number one. You can see that's the back door that you're looking at through.
Yeah.
You know, on the other side of the amp, it's all clear.
That's that curved plexi piece we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then this arc here, this had two of those processors were linkable for, I think we had 16 channels running active in this thing, if I remember right. And all of those channels were done through those two processors.
Yeah, so it's funny. So you had two processors running 16 channels active. Okay, so let's put this to today's product. So we're about to release a new processor that is unbelievable, right? And what it can do and how it controls and the whole setup wizard that it has. And guess what? It's 16 channels in, 16 channels out. So what you used to have to do with two F1 pieces, you can now do with a single one of our processors.
That's a really good point. You know, and look, the tech, that's a good example of it. And look at these amps too. I mean, it's hard to get a scale, but those amps are 24 inches long. I think they were huge.
Yeah.
You know,
massive.
And the tech has come such a long way. And, you know, we pushed it a lot with our Power Pack series to get them smaller and more compact and more efficient mainly. And, you know, it's just been a long road, but it shows you how far we've come over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, and I tell this to people all the time, that's a benefit of having engineering done by us, right? We engineer our own product. So we're not reliant on other people to wait for them to come out for technology. This is stuff that's produced by us. So that's really cool. So let's keep moving on here.
That's kind of the whole purpose of F number one status to begin with, is to you know, test our engineers. Let's see what is possible. And that's exactly what this line of product was designed to do, show what was possible.
Yep.
You can see in this picture, three-way, we talked a little bit about this, but three-way setup built into the doors. And it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but that the mid and the tweet were actually set back into the door panel. They were kind of where the mirror would normally be. And they were kind of built back in there so that it would add a little bit of extra width beyond where just the confines of the normal vehicle. So you had that full three-way set. It's a 7, a 3, and a 2, like a 2-inch tweeter. We had a center channel front and rear.
That was,
you know, because that was part of the processing. Probably one of my favorite elements of this car is the steering wheel. And if you look, the F number one deck was built into the middle at the very top there. You can see that's the key hole.
Yeah.
There's the head unit. That little knob down there was actually the shifter. We put a position electric motor with a 4-position switch to be able to do park, reverse, neutral drive, to be able to shift it electrically through there. And then you can see there's two kind of hand grips that actually are connected to the outer ring of this steering wheel. So the entire center part of that steering wheel is stationary. Only the outer ring moves. Okay. Yeah. That goes through the dash, transferred a chain drive from that to where the stock steering would come through. That allowed us to make the full lock steering 90 degrees. So it's just like an F1 car. This is full left, that's full right.
Wow. Talk about engineering.
Yeah, this was one of my personal favorites. I really enjoyed this vehicle. This and the next one we're about to see were probably my two favorites.
All right, let's keep moving on. I don't want to take up too many people's time. Oh, that's that rear center channel. Yep.
Oh yeah, there's a rear center channel on a little pile. You can see the two processors in that pic too.
Yep.
Yeah, this thing was a tuning nightmare. We had to spend a lot of time tuning this thing.
Oh sure, I'm sure. All right, here's another beast.
Yeah, if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick this one as my personal favorite. I just love the look of this car. This thing, we just wanted it. I mean, the name says it all. Sinister 6. It's a BMW 6 Series, or it used to be. Convertible again. But man, we tore this thing up. This was actually a lemon law buyback car from California. So we took this, we got a smoking deal on it. We bought it, and we just gutted this thing. And the goal was to make it just look like the Terminator. We just wanted it to be just a menace wherever it went. It's a custom, the complete body is all custom built. It's all wide body. Everything's been touched on this thing. The center drive on this is very unique because this whole top actually slides back, and the center rotates 90 degrees counterclockwise, and that allows you to get in and out of the vehicle. Then you would sit in it, and it would rotate and close and lock you in place. So this also had something that
these PDX they would show when you were open, and then when you close it up, they went hidden away.
They went hidden, and this was the launch of PDX. And actually, in the back area, when it's closed up, we had a window built into that that rack. And the idea was it was like a mid-engine car, like a Ferrari, Lamborghini. You always have a plexi window where you can see the motor. Well, that's what we did, but we used the amps as the motor because it was designed to show off that new PDX tech. And again, think about this amplifier in 2006. The innovation. This was the smallest, best sounding digital amp by far on the market. This started a trend in this car audio market for smaller, more efficient, more powerful amplifiers.
Yeah, and what was awesome about these amps, right? So they were fully digital, and everybody's like, oh, they can't sound good. They're fully digital. Well, then they hear them, and they're like, these things sound amazing. So then we take it to the next level with the next series of PDX, right? And now we build off that with the current X series, and then the current X series trickles into R series. So it's just amazing what this platform development did, and really just the trajectory years later that this created was just
absolutely
incredible.
I'll never forget, it took some time for these amps to really catch on, because I don't think dealers really believe that they made the power. They look at it and go, there's no way that thing's 1,000 watts, until they tried it, put it in a car, and then wow, they really started to realize that this is a real deal.
Yeah, no, they were awesome. All right, so let's show some more of this. So this is kind of the inside view. I see a V-Hub Pro. I remember those.
They're talking about a product ahead of its time. That was a very unique product, kind of designed.
That was your radio there. That was the radio there. And then
everything else. The other thing I really liked about this vehicle, this was the first car I ever saw that used, we actually used cameras for the rear view mirrors. And if you look on the left and right screens, you can actually see the image of the camera. That's from the left side, and the one on the right is from the right side. The center one was for the controller, for the V-Hub, and then you had a video playing on the kind of the middle outer two. So, those screens each had an individual purpose. Those were, at the time, it's common to see a 10-inch screen in a car now, but at the time, you didn't see anything like this, In 2006, this thing was pretty heady. These are actually screens out of our drop-down overhead monitors. That's what we used to make them.
10.2s, yep.
Yep.
Let's see what else. Oh, so here's that back. That's the glass you were talking about.
Yeah, that's a glass, so you can see the amps through that. It's kind of hard to see here, but they had a really unique subwoofer arrangement too. So X series, the same ones you use in the Mini. These are 12s. Yep. These actually fired down at the ground, and it was kind of like a ground effect chamber that was designed to load against the ground. And then the ports actually came all the way up and fired through the front edge of the vehicle. Kind of through the sides where it's kind of hard to see it, but
it pounded though. And then another thing that was really cool were these the brake lights.
Yeah. So that was actually a screen built behind there, and we would mess with people. So normally we had a DVD player in there, and it would play on a loop. And normally this red, if you could see it up close, it looked like LED dots. That's what you would see. But every once in a while, we'd show like a clip of a movie or a video, and it would make people double take because they thought, what did I just see? And we would do it so fast that it would always cause them to stop and turn around and ask a question. And it was great. It was just one more little detail, a little Easter egg, I guess, element. These cars had a lot of details. You can tell there's a lot of time that went into them. Those details are, I think, what's really kind of unique. I'll give you an example. The airbrushing. Every time, if you look at any one of these cars, they have our initials of the builders airbrushed somewhere in the paint. We never really talked about it, but if somebody noticed it, we'd bring it up because it was one of those things that it was just kind of a cool little detail,
Yeah, that is. I remember seeing this thing. I don't remember what size the wheels were on this.
It had 26s in the back and 24s in the front. Again, for the time, massive.
For the time, it was like, I remember seeing it. I saw it the first day of CES, or just before, because we did the booth walkthrough, and I was like, those things are unbelievable.
And we built the wheels, and we molded the body around the wheel. That whole side slab of that body is all custom built out of fiberglass, and we were able to make that thing fit exactly the way we wanted.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And we have more to talk about, so let's keep going on. So this thing was one of my favorite, just elegance, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this one we took a different approach. We got away from the airbrushing. We wanted classy, elegant overall look and feel for this thing. And this was a Mercedes R-Class originally. The entire body, except for the roof, the actual roof and the windshield is stock. But what we did is we raised the belt line of the car about 8 inches, and we gave it a curve that went throughout the entire car. And you can see, I mean, the majority, probably about half the time fabrication wise on this was the actual body. You know, there was a ton of work put into this thing, and if you put it next to an RLS, a stock one, or a stock R series, you can really see it. 30-inch wheels, and again, custom made. These were 30 by 13, which wasn't available. We had to get a center custom machine. We had hoops, you know, custom made and we put these together and again molded the body around it. You know, the interior was really, you know, kind of tan leather and really subtle. This thing it wasn't center drive, but it was able to be driven from both seats. If you see that Mercedes logo in the middle there was actually the steering wheel. So we had a gear mechanism that allowed that to steer the car. And then you had a gas and brake pedal you can see there on both sides. And then you had a key and a shifter, and that's how you drove the thing. Now, granted, we weren't driving this thing down the freeway, but you know, to driving in and out of shows, that's what we used. And we also did some wood grain, you know, which was actually a paint effect that was done on fiberglass to be able to give it this kind of classy, really rich and supple look inside. Another one of my favorite parts of this car, which I don't think we have a picture of it, but there was a big Mercedes logo, about a 12-inch logo on the back of this thing. Actually, it's bigger than that. And the whole thing would motorize out, and it would spin 360 degrees as it slid out the back of the car. And that's what all the amps were mounted on that thing, all the PDX amps, so that when it was in, it was completely hidden, but when it was out, it showed off all the amps. Super cool.
I wish I had a picture of that because it was just really cool.
Somewhere.
And the way that the seat mounted.
We need to post the install pictures of this thing back up somewhere, of all these things back up, so you guys can check them out, because you can learn a lot by looking at the install pictures.
Oh yeah, well, so something cool on these the seats, the way the seats they mounted to the doors, so the doors motorized out, and then you sat on the door and they motorized in.
Kind of rotating. The seat would be here, the door was here, and it would rotate like this straight up. By the side.
Really, really cool. All right, so let's keep going. So this is the last one I think we're going to talk about today. And very, very cool. I know a lot of time went into this. And
this thing honestly was the biggest. There was more labor in this thing than any other vehicle that we did. And this is, you know, I'm a boat guy in addition to being a car guy. Not everybody's into boats, and I get that. And it's hard for non-boat guys to see the amount of labor that went into this boat. But if you could see what the stock boat used to look like, you realize that there's literally not one part of this boat that hasn't been touched. I mean, the driver and passenger seat were moved up about 1.5 feet to make more room in the back. The entire interior is all hand fabricated. It's all molded, you know, hand molded. You can imagine sanding upside down inside of some of these things and painting, and you know, it was just a massive amount of work. You know, the amp racks they're PDX Marine. This was the launch of the Marine series, of course, is why we built the boat in the first place. Those amp racks actually motorize up and out of that dome, so they pop up like this, and as they come up, they unfold. So that's all just one screw job, one motor on each side, but it's all mechanism that allows it to run up and down and seal when it's closed. Yeah. And this thing jams. There's 22 speakers, 22 of the 7-inch Marine speakers in this thing. 6 12-inch studs. We had this at the Miami Boat Show one time. This is a good story about that one. We were playing Hot for Teacher. You know Hot for Teacher right at the beginning, that drum solo. We played it full volume on this thing. We had one of the officials from the show come running up to the boat because he thought we'd started the boat. He thought it was running. That's what he thought the noise was. And of course, you're not allowed to start your boat at the show, right? Freaking out, like, oh, it's just a sound system. No, he sat a minute, and he was cool after that. But yeah, I mean, it was that impressive to where it sounded like a big burly V8 running when it was playing. It was pretty impressive.
You know, so let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question real quick.
Yeah.
So this boat was debuted at CES. Okay,
Yep.
and I've been in our CES booth a lot, and I don't see how this would fit through the doors to get into the CES booth.
That was a huge problem. Where we are at CES or have been is it's in a room, it's in a ballroom, and there's like a double wide door to be able to access that ballroom. It's like a fire exit. Well, we had to fit this boat through there, and there's no way you're going to fit it flat because it's too wide by about a foot. So what we did is we made a template, the shape of the hull, and we checked it against the dimensions we had, and we realized that if we tilted it up at a 45-degree angle, we could get it through the door. So we made a custom rack that used a high lift jack on either side to basically lift this boat up and tilt it at a 45-degree angle on this huge steel dolly. Okay. And this whole combination was so heavy that as we were able to get it through the door, and then we had to roll it on carpet. Well, they didn't want to mess up the carpet, so we put 3/4 inch plywood on top of the carpet. It was cracking 3/4 inch 7-ply plywood as we're rolling this thing to get it into place. And it took about 10 guys to even move it.
Oh, I'm
It was
sure.
just incredible. And then, we got it in. Our plan was to get it in and then set it back down flat. But we got it in the show and realized, man, this thing looks so much cooler. Tilted
Yeah.
up on the side because you can see
Yeah.
into it. So we
Yeah.
left it like that for the show. And you'll see pictures of it at CES in 07 with it tilted up like that.
Yeah, I remember that.
Half the boat wasn't even finished. We didn't have any of the rigging or the motor run, anything like that at the time. So after the show, then we did all the other stuff to make it a real boat. This is actually, I still own this boat. This is my personal boat. I bought it as a project, and it just worked out good that Alpine needed a boat at the time. So I thought, well, we'll use this one, and I've kept it in as good a shape as I can, and it still works. It works great, sounds great, does everything it's supposed to do. It's a blast.
Well, like I've said before, and I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard it, but if you ever need a place to store it, it can come down to Florida.
Yeah, you can have fun with it down where you live in Florida.
Oh man, that thing would
this
be.
draws a crowd. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. Well, hey Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to hang with us today, and for going through this historical presentation with us. I talked to you before about maybe doing a Facebook Live with me and maybe answer some questions for people. Is that still something we do?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's set it up.
All right. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to publish this video. I'll post it out, and then we'll set up a time to do a Facebook Live. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. Thank you to Steve for joining us, and we'll talk to all of you guys soon.
Thanks, guys.